Chapter 7 Killer Chuck. Brad parked in his assigned spot in the underground garage, just below Vector Defense's main administration building. The campus sprawled across dozens of acres and multiple buildings, structures, warehouses, and wide-open fields for testing. The heartbeat for all company activity took place in the 20-story administration building. For Brad, the assigned parking was convenient. It was a short stroll to a bank of elevators and then a short ride to the R&D labs. It would have also been convenient for Richard. The top floor of the administration building held the executive offices, where Richard worked. Unfortunately, Brad always insisted on dropping him off on the outskirts of the campus, down the street from Vector Defense Way. The road was the main artery that ran straight into the heart of the campus, circled a massive roundabout in the front of the administration building, before winding a circuitous route through the campus's multiple acres worth of U.S. government-funded military production facilities. Brad insisted on this inconvenience because he couldn't be seen giving a ride to Richard. And since Richard had been dropped off so far away, he still had to walk past the city bus stop that served the campus. He would have had less distance to walk if he had just taken the bus in the first place. So, double, triple, clusterfuck Brad fucking Johnson, his fucking cock compensator of a car, and his misogynistic fuckfest of a relationship with Tess. When Richard saw the city bus round a corner up ahead, he shouldered his messenger bag of work essentials and picked up his pace. If he could get ahead of the bus, Richard wouldn't have to explain why he was walking in from so far down the street, should he cross paths with anyone he knew. The effort was in vain. He scooted past the bus stop just as the air brakes hissed. He turned down the pedestrian path that ran alongside Vector Defense Way, keeping his head down and his pace brisk, trying to ignore the sounds of people exiting the bus behind him. "Yo, Richard, wait up, dude!" He hesitated only briefly, but then kept walking. Richard recognized the voice, but was reluctant to stop and talk, hoping it looked like he hadn't heard his name called. He cursed himself for not remembering his headphones. He wouldn't even need anything to listen to, just pop them on so he'd have a reason to ignore people. Then he heard the distinct sound of shoes slapping against the concrete as the person jogged to catch up with him. "Yo, hold up," Chuck said, dropping a hand on Richard's shoulder. Richard couldn't help but shrink back. An uncomfortable, icy tingle ran up his spine. It was the first time someone had touched him since his dick and balls fell off. Chuck Cramer stepped back, holding his palms up, and grinned. The nearly 40-year-old mail clerk was taller than Richard, and he dressed in mailroom casual, jeans and an untucked dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His hair seemed to defy combs, brushes, and gravity, all with equal chaotic abandonment of style. His eyes were bright with an energy Richard hadn't personally experienced in what felt like ages. "Whoa, chill out, my dude," he said. "Just your buddy Chucky. I come in peace. Left my big stabby knife at home and everything." Chuck gripped an invisible knife and repeatedly swung an arc through the air, making the signature psycho sting with his mouth. He then added a bass beat underneath the stinger, rolling a high snare, and chopped the air as he beatboxed around the theme. He wrapped it up with a pretty convincing record scratch and a wide flourish of his hands. It wasn't bad. Once again, Richard had to admire the older man's commitment to his creative craft. Yeah? What do you think? I'm thinking I might use it tonight. You're coming, right? Oh, hey, you didn't say peep about the track I sent last night. All that silence left my imagination spinning, and I figured you must have been lying dead in a ditch somewhere. You got me worried about my little buddy. Chuck threw his arm around Richard's shoulder and started walking him down the pedestrian path. That icy feeling twisted in his chest, and Richard felt hyper-aware of his dickless crotch. He shrugged off Chuck's arm as nonchalantly as possible. It's warm, still a lot of walking. Chuck pulled Richard to a stop and grabbed his shoulders, pulling him into a surprisingly intense gaze. Hey, buddy, listen. There is nothing wrong with a couple of pals showing a little affection to one another. He nodded to the campus in the distance, the admin building rising up from a broader base, making it look either like a giant fuck you finger or a particularly chody dick and balls. Don't be letting all that toxic masculine fuckery get in your head, all right? A steady stream of bus commuting Vector employees walked around the two men, having a moment in the middle of the sidewalk. Richard offered a small, awkward smile to them. To Chuck, he nodded rapidly. While he agreed with the sentiment, there was no need to dwell on it. Right, you're right. Now, can we just, Richard tried to twist away and continue down the path, but Chuck held him firm. Oh, no, Chuck said. Something is bothering you, Richard. I can read it all over your face, like it was scrawled on there by a 2-year-old with one of those thick, chunkular permanent markers. What is going on? Oh, was the audio sample really that bad? 'Cause I can take it, so just give it to me straight. It's not. Look, Chuck, your music was, Richard sighed. He wanted to confide in Chuck and tell him what happened, but he had no idea how to broach the subject of his dick falling off without feeling incredibly emasculated. With the touch of another human seeming to have the immediate effect of elevating his discomfort to 11, Richard was frozen with awkward indecision. One fact remained true, though. Chuck was as persistent as he was perceptive, and honesty had always been the best policy in their friendship. Richard swallowed, trying to avoid Chuck's penetrating gaze. Okay, well, maybe he didn't have to be completely honest. Actually, yeah, it wasn't great, your track, I mean. Chuck clapped his hands together in victory. I knew it! You are too good a dude, Richard. No, I need to hear this. Hit me, baby. Tell me everything you heard wrong. Pick the track to shreds. Don't hold back now. Richard shrugged outwardly while breathing a sigh of relief on the inside. Putting aside the quiet solace of saving the de-dicking discussion for a different day, Richard was again impressed by the older man's eagerness to have his art critiqued by someone younger. There were parts that were good. I could tell what you were aiming for sure, but... Too sloppy, right? Richard nodded. It was too sloppy. You lost the beat too often, and some of the instruments you were trying to vocalize. Chuck waved it off and started down the manicured path, patting Richard on the back to encourage him along. Say no more, my fantastic and fearlessly frank friend. Would you believe me if I told you that recording was from a week ago? Richard shot a sideways glance at Chuck's grinning mug, already wising up to Chuck's little ruse. His psycho-inspired freestyle was objectively better than the track he sent the night before. You wanted to make me uncomfortable with how bad you were and then wow me with an impossible overnight improvement. It is all about setting expectations. Richard couldn't help but smile. I'll have to keep that in mind, so I assume you have a current recording of last night's track. Chuck wiggled his eyebrows. It's all about setting low expectations and setting up the grand finale. You're gonna have to come to the show tonight. Lo siento, mi pequeño compadre. Richard groaned. He had barely gotten himself out of his own bedroom, and the idea of going out to some seedy, low-rent bar felt flat out impossible. On the other hand, he hated the idea of not showing up for Chuck. But with that jar sitting on his dresser, Richard wasn't even sure if he'd make it through the day. His face twisted in discomfort. Listen, Richard, buddy, it's me, Chuck insisted, reading the anguish on Richard's face as clear as the other marker-scrawled messages. Awkward places, loud noises, social anxiety, and, well, fucking Tess, am I right? Richard sighed and rubbed his brow. Last night was the worst, he said entirely truthfully. Is she still boning Captain Douche Monkey McFuckface? Chuck knew about Brad, but Richard wasn't sure when he last updated him on the situation. Not that it mattered, the mail clerk had an uncanny way of reading between the lines. Chuck continued talking before Richard could get his thoughts together. I ever tell you about the time I was freelancing for a Greater Plains Quarterly? I was photographing a tribe of East African natives hunting wildebeest from a hang glider. Chuck hesitated and quirked an eyebrow before clarifying. Yeah, I was the one in the hang glider doing the photo work, and the natives were down on the ground doing the hunting. Richard nodded. He was used to Chuck always being all over the place. They continued walking. Anyway, there I was, in this full-body sling, right underneath the pilot guy. I think his name was Bob. Greg? No, Tommy. Shit. No, yeah, it was Bob. And I'm shooting on a Nikon D4 with a 600mm long lens. And let me tell you, this thing was a beast. Fucking expensive as hell. And there I was, shooting the natives as they hurled their spears at the wildebeests. Just fucking bounding all over, kicking up these magnificent dust clouds when I somehow hit the wrong button or something. And I shit you not, that beautiful piece of glass fell straight off the mount and... Chuck produced an impressive plummeting zipper sound effect, followed by a simple pop of his lips. Right on the head of one of the natives. He shook his head absently, momentarily lost in the memory. Richard processed the story with a quiet horror. A goddamn shame, Chuck said. I had to finish the shoot with a GoPro, but from that height, the angle was way too, Chuck opened his hands in a V, which then split apart to an arm's-length demonstration of the panoramic, wide-angle shot. He accompanied the gesture with a warbling whistle effect. Way too wide. Everything looked like tiny little miniatures weirdos using their war fetish reenactment models or whatever. And of course, I'm working for a print magazine. You remember what those are, right? Chuck chuckled and backhanded Richard's shoulder. High resolution, high fidelity, and glossy color that leaps right off the page. That old, wide GoPro shit would have never cut mustard farts, so I ended up drawing them a picture. Worked out pretty well, though. And I got double my usual rate for the illustration, despite losing their lens, which I guess was covered by insurance, so it was pretty fucking convenient I took those night classes to learn to draw a few months before heading out to Africa. They were getting close to that huge roundabout in front of the main entrance to the administration building. It was a park-like green space surrounded by tall, manicured hedges. Right in the center was Vector Defense's first missile, erected as a monument to the company's origins. To the right, they could see a stage for the campaign rally. The entire surface lot had been cordoned off for the event, and employee vehicles were being redirected a half-mile away to empty fields used as auxiliary lots. Event workers were mounting a sign over the stage that read, "Nicholas Green for Governor." "Motherfucker," Chuck muttered. "Look at that shit right there." Richard wasn't. He was too busy, stuck in Africa. "Chuck, the, native." Chuck blinked at him, confused. "What?" "The guy you dropped the camera lens on?" Chuck's eyes brightened. "In Africa! Oh, yeah, like I said, beast of a lens." He held his hands apart to demonstrate a roughly 18-inch length. "Yeah, he died pretty instantly, given the circumstances, which was probably good, all things considered, because you do not want to be bleeding out in the middle of a..." "What, Chuck, you killed a man?" Chuck laughed, struck by the absurdity of the statement. "Well, don't be... No. I didn't kill anybody. The lens, that's what killed him." "Chuck, you were pointing it at him." Chuck held up a finger to disagree. "I was..." His finger hung in the air as he reprocessed the facts of the story. "Oh, fuck. Holy mother of Buddha. Oh. Chuck." He grabbed Richard's shoulders again, a look of horror twisting his face. "Oh, I killed a man. How did I never..." "Sweet motherfucker, Richard." Richard felt the panic rise, and then everything just fizzled. He thought of how Chuck misrepresented his beatbox recording from the night before. He shook his head, dismissing the story in its entirety. "Okay, fuck off. You actually had me there." Chuck looked shocked. I did?" "There's no way you could have killed anybody hang gliding over the African plains. Come on, man." Chuck smiled awkwardly. But right, yeah, you saw right through yeah. They continued walking, and Richard asked, Okay, so it's like a parable then, sure, but, spell it out for me." Chuck rubbed his cheek, lost in thought. Chuck?" Yeah, what now?" "What was the point of the story?" Richard asked. "How does losing a camera lens relate to me and Tess?" You and, Tess," Chuck repeated, his brain slowly spinning back to the present. "Well, yeah, it relates because, sometimes shit just falls off, right? Beyond your control. I mean, like the lens, right? And you don't have a choice but to let it go, and just like that, suddenly your life is, oh Jesus, changed forever. And there's nothing you could have done. It just... Chuck repeated the plummeting zipper sound effect. Only this time, it was long, depressed, and the plop at the end was wet and flat.